Hello crafting friends, welcome to my vlog. Today, this week I'm going to make a small quilt. I'm going to show you the whole process that I go through to make a small quilt. I'm going to make this beautiful little thing for my granddaughter's possum, which is a possum puppet, somewhat like a doll, but I'll show you how I cut the pieces, how I choose the colours. I've got some little blocks left over and I thought they would make a perfect little quilt. Show you how I sew them together, chain pieced, and how I hand quilt in Big Stitch Quilting. And yeah, it has taken me a week to finish this little quilt because I've been doing other things in between, but this basically is what's going to happen in this episode. So I hope you enjoy it and we'll get on with it. This morning I'm just sitting near my sewing machine and I found these tiny little pieces that I haven't finished. I'm thinking I should put them together and make something lovely, maybe a doll's quilt for Audrey. So I don't have the pattern anymore of what I was working with, but this is a log cabin basically. Cute little block. I've got it in blue and orange, cats, and some cute little pieces. They're very lovely. These are 2.5 inch squares. The sashings are 1.5 inch cut. The squares are 2.5 inch cut, so they come down a little. They have 1/4 inch seam allowance, generous 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I thought I'd just see how we can go with these and see how many more I have to make with this pile that I have left. I don't want to cut anymore, so we'll go with what we have. I might make some more out of these little pieces, so we'll see what we've got first. Oh, that's it with the squares. So I've got 4 little blocks. I would like 9, and I've got this fabric left over that was with it. So that's really handy. It's got an embossed sort of pattern on it. Little hearts. So I'm going to sew these log cabins together. Hopefully I'll have enough. So I've got 4 already. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and one left over. So what I'm going to do now is connect all these pieces to the sides. So I'll do the whole 9. You can see there's one here around the wrong way. So some call this set out of a log cabin at courthouse step, mainly because the sides go first, the 2 sides. Usually for the log cabin you just have the center and you start with 1 and then you go round, and that would stop there and then you could connect the next one. But yeah, see how we go. Now, this should take me a little bit of time. I think I'll do this before I have lunch, so it is 12 o'clock now, it's midday. We'll see how we go. I do want to use up all my little tiny bits of projects that I've got. Just makes sense, doesn't it? Also, there's many other things you can make with these little blocks, like a pin cushion, a center for something else. So many possibilities, you know. Soup, those hot soup holders. I made a lot of those a few years back, and they are so handy. They're like an oven mitt, but you just put your little bowl of hot soup in it, or your cup of hot soup, and stops your hand getting burnt. Kids love them. See how we go. I hear the lawnmower outside. There's nothing I can do about it, I'm sorry. This is how we start. So I have the square down and the first piece ready to go, but I don't cut the long strip into sections to fit the square. I will continue on and I will string piece these two. I'll just put the next one there like that, and I'll keep going till I run out of fabric, and then I'll start with the next one. And I have them string piece now onto this one piece and one extra. Now I just snip them with the scissors and start on the other side. The next step is piecing the second part of the step. So I've just laid it on top, and it won't stitch into the edge because it's that way, and then I'll string piece these together and I will have the two sides ready. So I've got the two sides sewn on. Next step is to just press them lightly with my finger, and then I will start on the top and the bottom, here and here, and I'll string piece those two, and then I'll iron them. See how we go. When connecting the next layer of strips, I think it's important to make sure the facings are laying the way you want them to, and they're all flat. And I want all my centers to be laying towards the outside of the block, like so. I just think it's easier when you come to piece the whole thing and also to quilt it. Oh, sorry, hang on. So I'm up to stitching the tops and the bottoms on, and I think it's important at this step to make sure that seam allowances are facing out like this. Makes it easier to sew the next step on. It also makes the whole block flat, and that's what we want, isn't it? And just give it a press when I'm up to when I've finished the whole four sides. I think that's the way to go. Makes it a fast little exercise, especially if you're making a very tiny quilt. But yeah, the seam allowances. I do have a thing about seam allowances. I think it is important to have them all laying flat and in the direction that you want them to go, just so you don't have any bumps. And you can, it's easier, I also think it's easier to line up the points. See there? If you have all the seam allowances going in the way that you want them. That's just a nifty point to keep mind of. Just seam allowances flat and the way you want them to go, especially underneath. So you want to have the underneath seam allowances also going the way that you want them to have a flat seam. I've sewn all the 9 little squares together. Up. Little squares are all together. Now I just have to sew them together, chain piece them, and that will be a nice little doll's quilt. As it's a very small quilt, I'll show you how I make a little quilt. Make any size quilt really, and it should be fun. Hope Audie likes it. Next I'm sewing the squares together. I'll cut the batting, find some batting. Sometimes I don't use batting, I use flannelette for a very small project like this. So a 15-inch square of flannelette would do perfectly well. And a back, pin them together, And this would be very easy to sew on my little domestic sewing machine. I've had this little sewing machine for 10 years, I'd say. Hasn't missed a beat. Very basic sewing machine and very reliable. Easy to clean. Nothing goes wrong with it. So yeah, I'll get on with this now. I think I'll iron them first. Now I'm ironing these little blocks, and see how all the seams are flat, and especially on the corners. Flip her over. I always iron the back first. Makes it so much easier to piece together. I'll just straighten it out. Little blocks are all ironed. I'm just going to get them ready to sew. Chain piecing makes it so much easier. Then I'll connect these two together, the 3 rows, then those vertically, and then we'll go across horizontally. Exactly the same as a big quilt, but this is a little quilt, Dolly's quilt. I've ironed the little blocks together. It makes the size of an ordinary quilt block, like 12 by 12, but it is a doll's quilt. I'm just now going to trim up the edges to make it all straight, and I use my Olaf rotary cutter, and I'll just trim everything off neat and square. I've got a choice of backs here. They need joining together, but I will make a patchwork back, I'm thinking, and I'll also get the binding out of that too. And yeah, then I'll just need a piece of flannel for the middle of the quilt, and that is it. I'll keep you posted. I found this beautiful fluoro pink, and I think this will go perfectly with this little quilt. So what I'm going to do is cut the back out of it, and I'm going to cut the binding and a border maybe. I think there's enough to do it all. It's going to be so exciting. Do you have any little girls that would love a quilt made with these fabrics and this size for a little dolly? Audrey's got a possum, and I think Possum might like a little hug. So I think Possum would like this pink. I've cut the binding to this little quilt, and I've cut it at 2 inches instead of 2.5 inches, which is the width I cut for a big quilt. But as this is a little quilt, it's only 2 inches, and I got enough to make the binding, and I also got enough to make the back. And I've connected it all together. I'm just making flat seams, as I don't have to make mitered seams on this one. I'm going to go and iron it now in half, and I'll be ready to sew onto the little quilt. Just ironed the binding in half. It looks like ribbon. It's so pretty. This morning I'm getting set up to finish this little quilt, and I will show you exactly how I construct a quilt. This is just a little quilt, but I do exactly the same for a big quilt. So I'm going to now cut the batting. I've got some scrap batting from Judith to fit, and that will be the center of it. I don't mind scrap batting for little quilts because I can just overlap them, and for a big quilt I would just go for a whole piece. Sometimes I do piece lap quilts, but it's rare. So this is a beautiful soft cotton batting. It's thin, so perfect for a little quilt. So I'm going to do the batting. I'll show you how I do the batting, and because I'm doing a very small quilt, I'm going to have a patchwork batting also, just to use up those small pieces. So this is the size of the back. I've got that piece there, and I cut this piece here, and I want to make sure that the two sides are the same facing out. So, and I don't mind overlapping, as I said. So I've got a bit of an overlap. I know some people stitch these together or fuse them together, but I don't do that. And so I just lap it like that. I only want about a 1/2 inch lap. I'll just roughly trim that off. Now you can see I have a patchwork back also, batting. And I think that's perfect for me. Then we put the top on. And that's how you layer a quilt. That's how I layer a quilt. I think that's mainly how everybody layers a quilt, with the back, batting, and top. Then I'm going to pin. So this is pinning up, and I do pinning up the same as for a big quilt. I love these curved safety pins. They're perfect. And so I just pin around the edge, making sure to get the 3 layers in. And with these pins, you can put them right in, feel the back of the board, and they just rock up, and then you just clip them. So I'll go all the way around and put some in the middle. I'll do the middles now after I've done the bottom, I think. So I'll get back to you then. Last few pins are going in. I made really sure that the back leveled up with the front, otherwise we would have not the right size. And I've made sure to pin across here where I've got the overlapping batting, just to make sure that it doesn't move and keep everything secure. And I think this is enough pins for a little quilt. I've pinned all the way around the edge and in each block. Now to sew around the edge with the sewing machine and put the binding on. And this is the back, so you can see that everything is nice and neat there, no folds or anything. And we're ready to go with the sewing machine. So now I've got the 3 layers under the machine, and I'm going to sew around the edge on a 1/4 inch in. Making sure not to get any puckers or anything, just holding it all firmly, guiding it through. Take out the pins as I go. This will be ready for binding next. And I've decided to put in a little label of mine on the edge. I had some nice fabric labels made. I know it's for my granddaughter, but you know. I now have the whole quilt encased with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Everything is in place, and I will now trim it and get ready to put the binding on. So now I'll line my ruler. These see-through rulers are really good because you can see exactly how much you want to trim, and I'm going to do it about less than a 1/4 inch to the stitching line, because this is a small quilt, and also the binding is a 2-inch binding, so just a bit smaller than a big quilt, but exactly the same process. So in this process I'm sewing the binding to the quilt, making sure that I sew on the edge, and I've put the needle in so that it's just over a 1/4 inch so that it catches the previous line of stitching all around. When I get to the corner, I'm going to make a mitre because I like miters. And so I carefully place the needle in for a 90-degree angle and sew to the edge, like so. Come back and fold the binding just like this, so that the edge, this edge matches up with that edge, so that I have like so. This is really the only fiddly bit, and it's not really fiddly. And then I sew right from the edge to catch the mitre. And that's how the mitre looks at the moment. When I fold it back over, we'll see how it looks, and it's very neat. This is so fun. The binding is nearly completely on, attached, and I'm coming to where I need to sew both ends of the binding together. And I like to leave about 3 inches, I would say, either side of the part where I'm going to sew the binding. So what I will do, I'm just going to do a straight edge binding, straight edge stitch across here. I will cut it exactly about here. Yeah, and then I will sew across, straight across, unfold it of course, then fold it in half, flatten out the edges and sew it down, and this makes a nice crisp final part to the binding. Now it comes to the fun part. I'm going to sew the binding by machine onto the backing. So turn it over, and in this, so we'll see that I will sew close to the sewing, and that's how it will look on the front. Also, I'm going to sew my little label here. Gotta find it. I will find it shortly. This is how the quilt looks before I fold the binding over to sew it on the back. I've trimmed the mitered corners so that they fold under easily. And yeah, just ready to sew the back of the binding down now. And then I will sew the little label in the back too. And that will be the binding on. The next step is to do the machine quilting or hand quilting. See how we go with that. I'm still thinking. I've got the binding on now. Now just for the quilting, and I've decided to hand quilt. So these are the cottons that I've decided to use. They are number 12 Valdani cottons, pearl cottons. They are beautiful, and a trusty sticky tape. So I'm going to sticky tape the lines that I want to quilt on it, and I'm going to use these beautiful threads. I think they're lovely. I'm up to quilting, and as you can see, I've put down my sticky tape to start hand quilting. I'm going to use Big Stitch Quilting because that's what I usually do. I can hold this in my hands and quilt it, and I've put down the first layer, so I'm going to do a grid in those beautiful colors. To help me stay on the straight line, I use straight pins just to keep the 3 layers together, and helps me keep a good tight grip on the quilt, whether small or large quilt. This is how I do it. Hand quilting, I've got thread that's about 30 centimeters long. I know that's long for some, but not me. I like a long thread. And to start off with, I go back about 1 inch and do a double stitch, not a knot. I don't like knots. I don't like pulling them through the fabric and making a little hole. So I just do that, do a small back stitch. And basically it's just running stitches, big stitch quilting. I do like having the sticky tape to give me a guideline. I mean, I could draw it on or something, but I think this works just as well. I do like the sound of the thread going through fabrics. So you see, just little running stitches, but so much bigger stitches than a traditional quilter would do. And this is a slow process. And I'll just finish doing the grid in this type of quilt. Thank you for watching this episode of how I make a small quilt. The small quilt making is exactly the same as making a big quilt, and that's how I think it's a very easy process if you follow the basic steps, choose the colors that you love, patterns that you like, and just enjoy the whole process. It is beautiful, and you end up with a lovely finished item that everyone will enjoy eventually. In this case, it's a doll's quilt, and I think my granddaughter's possum, her puppet possum, will enjoy this little quilt too. Thanks, friends. Bye. It's 19th of July. It's very cool. It's a cool breeze. There's still a lot of people swimming because it's the school holidays here. I think the tide's coming in. There's a lot of sand being churned up in the waves, and they're very loud. It's a really nice day. I love it like this. It'd be great if I like it all year, but humidity will come. I see everyone surfing. Waves are coming right in. It's just so beautiful. So lucky to live near the ocean.